Did Elvis secretly record jazz? Was the king actually a closet opera fan? Could the rock and roll pioneer have had a future in reggae? Elvis Presley dominated the music landscape for over 2 decades with his unmistakable voice, magnetic stage presence, and revolutionary rock and roll sound. But behind the well-known hits and signature style, Elvis occasionally ventured into unexpected musical territories, recording covers that showcased his versatility and curiosity as an artist. These lesser-known genre experiments reveal a performer willing to push boundaries and explore new musical frontiers, even if these tracks never receive the attention of his mainstream successes. Number 15. Danny Boy, Celtic Folk. 1976. In the final years of his life, Elvis recorded a hauntingly beautiful version of the Irish classic, Danny Boy. The recording represented a significant departure from his rock and roll roots, prouting Elvis's ability to bring emotional depth to folk traditions. His interpretation featured a minimal arrangement that highlighted his mature voice, which by this point had developed a rich, resonant quality, particularly well suited to the melancholy Irish ballad. The recording session took place during a difficult period in Elvis's personal life, and some close to him suggested this might have contributed to the raw emotion evident in his delivery. While he had previously recorded gospel and spiritual music, this venture into Celtic folk territory showed a different side of his musical sensibilities altogether. Producer Felton Jarvis later remarked that Elvis connected with the song's themes of loss and longing in a particularly personal way. Elvis's Danny Boy received limited release and airplay at the time, overshadowed by his more commercial offerings. Music journalists who have revisited the recording have often expressed surprise at the conviction and authenticity Elvis brought to the traditional folk piece, with many suggesting it ranks among his most heartfelt vocal performances. The song eventually appeared on compilations of Elvis's lesser-known works, becoming something of a hidden gem for dedicated fans seeking to explore the full range of his artistic expression. Number 14. My Way, French Pop, Traditional Pop. 1973. Though Frank Sinatra made My Way famous in America, the song actually began as a French composition titled Comme d'habitude by Claude François. Elvis's version, recorded live in 1973 for the Aloha from Hawaii global satellite broadcast, represented his venture into the sophisticated traditional pop style typically associated with Sinatra and the Rat Pack. Elvis transformed the song from its French pop origins through his distinctive vocal approach, infusing the typically restrained traditional pop standard with dramatic crescendos and emotional intensity more characteristic of his rock and gospel performances. The arrangement featured a full orchestra, placing Elvis in a musical context quite different from his early rockabilly days or even his movie soundtrack era. Presley biographer Peter Gorilnik noted that Elvis had tremendous respect for Sinatra's artistry, making this cover particularly meaningful. Despite their different musical backgrounds and a somewhat adversarial relationship in the press during the 1950s, Elvis seemed eager to prove he could handle material associated with the more established traditional pop icon. The performance showcased Elvis's maturing artistic sensibilities and his desire to be recognized as more than just a rock and roll performer. While the Aloha from Hawaii special became a massive success, Elvis's interpretation of My Way sparked mixed reactions. Some critics praised his willingness to tackle sophisticated material, while others felt he overemphasized dramatic delivery at the expense of the song's nuance. Nevertheless, the performance demonstrated Elvis's interest in exploring musical worlds beyond the rock country and gospel foundations that made him famous. Number 13. It's Now or Never. Operatic Neapolitan, 1960. Perhaps Elvis's most commercially successful genre experiment came with It's Now or Never, a rock adaptation of the Italian operatic aria O Sole Mio. The song represented a significant artistic risk, as it required Elvis to adopt a more formal, vocal approach than his typical rock and roll style. Fresh out of the army in 1960, Elvis sought to reinvent himself and demonstrate growth as an artist. He had heard Mario Lanza's rendition of the classic Neapolitan song while stationed in Germany, and expressed interest in creating an English-language version. Songwriters Aaron Schroeder and Wally Gold provided new lyrics, and Elvis embraced the challenge of adapting his voice to the operatic melody. The recording session proved demanding, with Elvis requiring multiple takes to achieve the desired vocal performance. RCA executives initially expressed skepticism about the stylistic departure, concerned that rock fans might reject such a traditional European sound. Their concerns proved unfounded when It's Now or Never became one of Elvis's biggest worldwide hits, selling over 20 million copies, and demonstrating his crossover appeal. Music historian Colin Escott observed that It's Now or Never represented Elvis's conscious effort to mature artistically and appeal to adult audiences who might have dismissed his earlier rock work. The song's success encouraged Elvis to continue exploring different genres and more sophisticated material throughout the 1960s. Though many fans now consider the song a standard part of the Elvis catalog, at the time it represented a bold venture into operatic territory, rarely attempted by contemporary pop or rock performers. Number 12. Guitar Man. Country Blues Fusion. 1967. While Elvis had always incorporated country elements in his music, his 1967 recording of Jerry Reed's Guitar Man represented a deeper dive into authentic country blues territory. The song featured Reed himself on guitar, bringing an authenticity and technical complexity that differentiated this track from Elvis's more mainstream country-influenced recordings. The production coaxed a rawer, more organic sound than most of Elvis's 1960s output, which had been dominated by movie soundtracks and more polished pop arrangements. Reed's distinctive finger-picking style and Elvis's energetic vocal created a hybrid sound that bridged the gap between contemporary country blues and rock in ways Elvis hadn't previously explored. Recording engineer Velton Jarvis recalled that Elvis showed unusual enthusiasm during the Guitar Man sessions, seemingly reinvigorated by working with Reed and exploring a more authentic country blues approach. This renewed creative energy came during a period when Elvis had grown increasingly frustrated with the formulaic nature of his movie soundtrack recordings. Though Guitar Man didn't become one of Elvis's biggest hits, reaching only pound 43 on the Billboard charts, the recording marked an important transition in his career. The sessions helped inspire Elvis's creative resurgence that would culminate in his 1968 comeback special, where he revisited his blues roots with renewed conviction. Music critics have since recognized Guitar Man as evidence of Elvis's musical curiosity and willingness to explore authentic roots music even during his commercially challenging middle period. Number 11. Blue Moon Doo-Wop Experimentation. 1954. Early in his recording career, Elvis tackled the Rodgers and Hart standard Blue Moon, transforming it from a traditional pop ballad into something utterly unique. His interpretation abandoned the conventional melody line for extended portions of the song, creating a dreamlike, almost otherworldly quality that bore little resemblance to previous versions. Recorded at Sun Studios under Sam Phillips' guidance, this early experiment toqued Elvis's willingness to completely reimagine established standards. The sparse arrangement featured minimal instrumentation, with Elvis's voice floating above Scotty Moore's guitar and Bill Black's bass in a style that defied easy categorization. Music. Journalist Grail Marcus described the recording as an alien experiment in vocal possibilities, noting how it stood apart from both Elvis's other early recordings and the original composition itself. The falsetto vocals and spectral quality of the performance suggested influences from doo-wop and African American spiritual traditions, while creating something that sounded entirely new. The recording received limited attention upon its initial release, as it didn't fit neatly into the rockabilly sound Elvis was establishing. Over time, however, music historians have pointed to Blue Moon as evidence of Elvis's early artistic daring and willingness to take songs into unexpected territory. This experimental approach demonstrated that even at the beginning of his career, Elvis was willing to transcend genre boundaries in search of new forms of musical expression. Number 10. Reconsider Baby. Urban Blues. 1960. Elvis made a striking venture into authentic urban blues with his 1960 recording of Lowell Fulson's Reconsider Baby. The track featured prominent saxophone work by Boots Randolph and a gritty vocal performance that demonstrated Elvis's deep appreciation for African American blues traditions. The recording session took a decidedly different approach from Elvis's more polished pop productions of the era. Producer Chet Atkins allowed for a loose jam session feel that captured the raw energy and improvisational spirit of classic blues recordings. Elvis sounded liberated by the format, delivering one of his most soulful vocal performances. Blues historian Peter Grolnick noted that Reconsider Baby represented one of the few instances where Elvis was able to fully explore his blues influences on record during his time at RCA. The song's arrangement stayed remarkably faithful to its blues origins, rather than adapting the material to fit a more commercial pop template. Though released on Elvis's Elvis Is Back album following his return from military service, Reconsider Baby received little promotion as a single and remained largely unknown to casual fans. Blues musicians and critics, however, have long pointed to the recording as evidence of Elvis's genuine feeling for the blues form and his ability to perform convincingly within the genre when given the opportunity. The track has gained increasing recognition in retrospective assessments of Elvis's musical legacy, particularly among those seeking to understand the full breadth of his musical interests and capabilities. Number 9. You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, or Orchestral Pop. European Ballad. 1970. In 1970, Elvis recorded a powerful version of Dusty Springfield's You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, a song that had originated as the Italian composition Io ce non vivo, senza te. His interpretation leaned heavily into the dramatic orchestral pop style, popular in European music of the period, representing a significant departure from his rock and roll roots. The arrangement featured swelling strings, French horns, and a gradual build to an emotional climax that toegate Elvis's increasingly operatic vocal approach. Producer Felton Jarvis constructed a sound that had more in common with contemporary European artists like Engelbert Humperdinck than with American rock music of the time. Elvis approached the song with remarkable commitment, delivering a vocal performance that music critic David Fricke described as tormented grandeur. The recording demonstrated Elvis's growing interest in material that allowed him to explore his full vocal range and dramatic capabilities, moving far beyond the constraints of conventional rock and roll. While the song reached pound 11 on the Billboard Hot 100, it has remained somewhat overlooked in discussions of Elvis's musical evolution. The track exemplified his willingness to embrace international pop traditions during his concert years, as he increasingly incorporated European and American standards into his live performances alongside his rock and gospel repertoire. This orchestral pop experiment toegate Elvis's versatility and his ability to adapt his voice to dramatic ballad styles originating from outside the American musical tradition. Number 8. Tomorrow is a Long Time Folk, 1966. One of Elvis's most unexpected genre experiments came with his 1966 recording of Bob Dylan's Tomorrow is a Long Time. This venture into contemporary folk music revealed a softer, more introspective side of Elvis rarely displayed in his commercial releases of the period. Recorded during sessions for the Spin Out soundtrack, but released on the Speedway album, the folk ballad received the gentle, understated treatment that stood in stark contrast to Elvis's movie songs. The arrangement featured acoustic guitar prominently, with Elvis delivering a restrained, intimate vocal performance that demonstrated his appreciation for Dylan's poetic lyrical style. Dylan himself later commented that Elvis's cover was the one recording I treasure the most, suggesting that the interpretation successfully captured the essence of the song despite coming from an artist associated with a very different musical tradition. The recording demonstrated Elvis's awareness of the contemporary folk movement and his desire to engage with serious songwriters of the era. Producer Felton Jarvis recalled that Elvis showed particular enthusiasm for the Dylan composition, requesting multiple takes to perfect his approach to the material. This attention to detail resulted in what many critics consider one of Elvis's most sensitive vocal performances, revealing artistic depths that many of his movie soundtrack recordings failed to explore. Though never released as a single, Tomorrow is a Long Time has gained recognition among Elvis aficionados and folk music enthusiasts as evidence of his broader musical interests and capabilities beyond his commercial image. Number 7. You'll Never Walk Alone, Broadway Inspirational, 1967. Elvis ventured into Broadway territory with his earnest interpretation of You'll Never Walk Alone, from Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical Carousel. The 1967 recording transformed the theatrical showstopper into a gospel-inflected inspirational piece that showcased Elvis's ability to bring personal conviction to material from the musical theater tradition. The arrangement built gradually from a restrained opening to a powerful climax, featuring a full choir and orchestra. Elvis's approach to the Broadway standard demonstrated his ability to navigate the formal structure of theatrical compositions while infusing them with the emotional directness characteristic of his gospel recordings. Elvis had long expressed admiration for the inspirational quality of certain Broadway compositions, particularly those with spiritual or uplifting themes. His friend and backup singer, Charlie Hodge, recalled that Elvis would often sing Broadway numbers informally during relaxation time, suggesting a genuine appreciation for the genre beyond commercial considerations. Though You'll Never Walk Alone appeared primarily on Elvis's gospel-oriented album, How Great Thou Art, rather than receiving single release, the recording demonstrated his ability to interpret theatrical material convincingly. Music historian Alana Nash observed that Elvis's approach to Broadway compositions revealed his instinctive understanding of dramatic musical structure and his capacity to bring authentic emotion to material far removed from his rock and roll origins. Number 6. My Happiness, per War Pop Standard, 1953. Elvis's very first recording, made at Sun Records as a supposed gift for his mother, was a cover of the 1940s pop standard, My Happiness. This early effort showed Elvis experimenting with pre-rock musical forms before he had developed his signature style. The private recording, made when Elvis was just 18 years old, revealed his interest in the smooth pop vocal styles that dominated American music before the rock and roll era. His approach to the song demonstrated influences from mainstream pop vocalists like Dean Martin and Perry Como, though hints of his future distinctive style occasionally emerged in his phrasing. Sun Records owner Sam Phillips was reportedly intrigued by the young singer's attempt to navigate the traditional pop format, noting Elvis's tendency to introduce blues inflections into material not originally conceived with those elements. This blend of traditional pop with more soulful delivery hinted at the musical fusion Elvis would soon help pioneer. Though never intended for commercial release, it eventually appeared on historical compilations decades later. My Happiness provides valuable insight into Elvis's pre-fame musical interests. Music journalist Peter Gorilnik suggested that the recording reveals how Elvis was trying on different vocal identities before finding his revolutionary approach. This early genre experiment serves as an important reminder that Elvis's artistic development involved conscious exploration of established musical traditions before he helped create entirely new ones. Number 5. Bridge Over Troubled Water. Gospel-infused folk rock, 1970. Elvis tackled Simon and Garfunkel's contemporary folk rock anthem, Bridge Over Troubled Water, just months after its original release, transforming the piano-based ballad into a gospel-infused tour de force. His interpretation significantly reworked the arrangement, incorporating elements from black gospel traditions that weren't present in the original recording. The production featured a full choir, Hammond organ, and a gradual build to an explosive final chorus that pushed Elvis's vocal to emotional extremes. This approach reframed the contemplative original as an exultant gospel declaration, demonstrating Elvis's ability to completely reimagine contemporary material through the lens of his gospel music background. Paul Simon reportedly expressed admiration for Elvis's bold reinterpretation, noting how thoroughly he had transformed the song into something that reflected his own musical heritage. The recording exemplified Elvis's talent for recognizing the gospel foundations underlying many contemporary compositions and bringing those elements to the forefront. While Elvis's version achieved modest chart success, reaching pound 11 on the Billboard Adult Contemporary chart, it represented one of his most successful artistic experiments of the 1970s. Music critics have noted how the performance bridges the gap between contemporary folk rock and traditional gospel music, prodding Elvis's ability to move backing between seemingly disparate musical worlds when materials sparked his creative interest. Number 4. Steamroller Blues. Blues rock, 1973. Elvis surprised many fans with his aggressive take on James Taylor's satirical Steamroller Blues during his 1973 Aloha from Hawaii television special. The performance saw Elvis fully embracing contemporary blues rock in a way that connected his early blues influences with the harder-edged sounds of the early 1970s. Unlike Taylor's originally tongue-in-cheek version, Elvis delivered the blues rock number with unflinching seriousness, backed by a horn section and electric guitar work that reflected the influence of contemporary acts like B.B. King's, later electric period, and even elements of funk. His growling vocal approached the material with an intensity that transformed the song's intention from satire to authentic blues expression. Elvis's guitarist, James Burton, recalled that Elvis had been listening to a variety of contemporary blues and rock artists during this period, showing particular interest in how traditional blues elements were being incorporated into harder rock contexts. This musical curiosity manifested in performances like Steamroller Blues, where Elvis seemed eager to demonstrate his relevance to current musical trends. While some critics at the time dismissed the performance as Elvis trying too hard to seem contemporary, retrospective assessments have recognized it as a successful venture into blues rock territory that demonstrated his continuing ability to adapt to evolving musical styles. The recording received periodic radio airplay and reached pound 17 on the Billboard chart, suggesting that audiences were receptive to Elvis exploring more aggressive contemporary sounds alongside his established repertoire. Number 3. Fever Jazz Lounge, 1960. Elvis ventured into jazz territory with his 1960 recording of Fever, a song previously popularized by Little Willie John and Peggy Lee. His interpretation stripped the arrangement down to the bare essentials, just bass drums and finger snaps accompanying his voice, creating an intimate jazz club atmosphere unlike anything in his previous recordings. The nihilist production highlighted Elvis's remarkable vocal control and rhythmic precision. Rather than overwhelming the jazz standard with rock and roll energy, he approached the material with restraint and nuance, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of jazz phrasing and dynamics rarely associated with his public image. Recording engineer Bill Porter recalled that Elvis requested the stripped-down arrangement specifically, wanting to create something that captured the intimate feeling of after-hours jazz performances he had experienced in small clubs. This attention to creating an authentic jazz atmosphere showed Elvis's respect for the genre and his desire to step convincingly into its stylistic framework. Though Fever wasn't released as a single at the time, appearing instead on Elvis's Elvis Is Back album. The recording has gained appreciation among music critics as evidence of his versatility and willingness to venture into sophisticated jazz territory. Jazz historian Ted Gioia noted that Elvis's interpretation showed surprising sensitivity to the jazz idiom, suggesting that with different career choices he might have developed further in this direction. The recording stands as one of Elvis's most successful ventures outside his established musical territory. Number 2. Where No One Stands Alone, Traditional Southern Gospel, 1967. While Elvis recorded many gospel songs throughout his career, his 1967 version of Where No One Stands Alone represented his deepest dive into traditional Southern gospel quartet style. The recording featured complex, four-part harmony arrangements that showcased Elvis's detailed knowledge of the genre's technical demands. The production captured the authentic sound of Southern gospel conventions with piano, organ, and vocal arrangements that closely adhered to the traditions established by groups like the Blackwood Brothers and the Statesman Quartet, ensembles Elvis had admired since his childhood. His lead vocal demonstrated a technical precision and stylistic authenticity that revealed his deep connection to this musical tradition. J.D. Sumner, the legendary gospel bass singer who later performed with Elvis, commented that this recording proved Elvis could have had a successful career exclusively in gospel music had he chosen that path. The performance displayed not only emotional conviction but also a sophisticated understanding of gospel-specific vocal techniques and arrangement principles. The track appeared on Elvis's gospel album How Great Thou Art, which won him a Grammy Award and represented some of his most personally meaningful work. Though less known to casual fans than his secular hits, Where No One Stands Alone has been recognized by gospel music historians as one of the most authentic mainstream interpretations of traditional Southern gospel style ever recorded by a pop performer. Number 1. I Just Can't Help Believin', Folk Country Crossover, 1970. Elvis ventured into the emerging folk country crossover style with his 1970 interpretation of I Just Can't Help Believin', originally recorded by B.J. Thomas. His live version, captured during his Las Vegas performances and released on the That's the Way It Is album, showcased his ability to adapt to the softer, more introspective sounds gaining popularity in the early 1970s. The arrangement featured acoustic guitars prominently, with Elvis delivering a restrained, nuanced vocal that emphasized storytelling over the dramatic flourishes characteristic of many of his performances during this period. This approach aligned with the emerging singer-knockin'-er aesthetic pioneered by artists like James Taylor and Chris Christopherson, demonstrating Elvis's awareness of evolving musical trends. Producer Felton Jarvis noted that Elvis showed particular enthusiasm for material that bridged the gap between folk, country, and pop, seeing these songs as opportunities to showcase a more subtle side of his artistry. His interpretation of "I Just Can't Help Believin'" achieved exactly this balance, finding a middle ground between his country roots and contemporary folk sensibilities. The recording received positive critical response, with many reviewers noting Elvis's ability to connect with current musical developments while maintaining his distinctive vocal identity. The song reached #6 on the adult contemporary chart, suggesting that audiences were receptive to Elvis exploring this gentler, more contemplative style. This successful genre experiment demonstrated that even 2 decades into his career, Elvis remained capable of authentic artistic growth and adaptation to changing musical landscapes. Did Elvis ever truly get credit for his musical versatility? Could these forgotten genre experiments change how we view the king of rock and roll?